To get into special programming, we're just going to press and hold the program button, keep holding it in until we get to level 2. As soon as we get to level 2, we're in special programming. It says SPPROG. The code for this is 123. And as soon as we get in here, our first step, SP1, is if I need to change between Fahrenheit and Celsius. This was something we saw during the setup mode. So if you set it incorrectly or the store manager says, hey, can you change that over to Celsius? This is where you could do it. We'll leave it in Fahrenheit. SP2 is my main language of the board. I'm going to cycle through the languages so you can see what's on here, what your options are. Put it back to English, and I'll leave it here. SP3 is initialization. This is typically something you wouldn't need to do unless the board had an issue. Let's say it was, kind of having a glitch that you couldn't resolve. You might want to try to reset the board. To reset the board, I just simply press and hold the number 1 check mark until it counts down to 0, and it reinitializes. This is a soft reboot. There's not a lot of damage that can be done here, so it's always worth a try if you're having an issue with the board. SP4 is my volume. I can change that, put it down to 1. You can see it getting pretty quiet. Hear it getting quiet, and I can crank it all the way up to 10. So I'll leave it at 10 for now. You can change it to whatever you wanted. Step 5 is our tone. This is going to make, this is if you wanted to make this control board sound different from this control. Or if you had a 4-well fryer, you could have every single control board potentially sound different, or all sound the same and change the tone. To go higher with the tone, I would increase the hertz. To go lower with the tone, decrease. I'm just going to leave it at 1300. SP6 is our melt cycle, and this is set up for liquid, or if I change it, solid. Liquid melt cycle is a more aggressive heat system. It's going to be heat on for about 15 seconds, heat off for 15 seconds. If I wanted to heat solid shortening, and be very careful if you heat solid in this, because if you leave it overnight in your drain pan, the lines could solidify, or in your jib, overnight that's going to get cold and could solidify, and then the top-off system doesn't work, or the filter gets plugged up. So typically I see people use primarily liquid oil, but the solid melt cycle is less aggressive. It's heat on for just a few seconds, 3 or 4, and then the heat's off for about 20 seconds. We'll put it back to liquid. SP7 is our idle mode. Idle mode is a function that takes if the fryer either sits idle for a certain amount of time, or if the store manually, team member manually puts the fryer into idle mode with the 0 button. It's a mode where the fryer's going to lower the heat, just shut the heat off until we hit a certain point. By default, our idle set point is 250 Fahrenheit. So with that heat decreasing like that, the downfall of idle mode is if you need to cook right now, you have to wait just a minute or 2 for that fryer to heat back up. Make sure you explain that to the store manager or whoever's making those decisions. Make sure they understand that. I would highly recommend using idle mode. It saves a lot of energy, and it also saves a lot of shortening life. It extends your oil life in the fryer. So we're going to leave that enabled. Since it's enabled, I get SP7A. Do I want to use the 0 button for idle? Most cases, I would say yes. You can manually put it into idle mode just by simply pressing the 0. If you have a lot of products, then you might want to leave the 0 button open for a 10th product, and then it would just automatically enter idle mode at that point. SP7B is auto idle. If I want to enable the auto idle, meaning if the fryer sits idle, no one's cooking in the left side or the right side for a certain amount of minutes that I can set here, then the fryer, I'll just set it to 15. Then after 15 minutes and no timers running, then the fryer would automatically enter the idle mode. To exit idle, I would just press the number 2X button and come out of the idle mode. I'm going to set that back to 0. SP7C is my set point. By default, our idle set point is 250 Fahrenheit. You can set your idle to a higher temperature, so it doesn't have to cool as much, and that means it doesn't take as long to heat back up to set point. Or you could set it to a lower temperature, and then the opposite would happen. When you exit idle, it would take longer to heat back up. But your oil savings, extend the oil life a little bit more this way. We'll set it back to the default of 250 Fahrenheit. SP8 is our filter tracking mode. And so filter tracking on the Evolution Elite comes in two different varieties. We have global and then we have mixed. Global is pretty simple to explain. Global means that out of all my products at the bottom, let's say my global filter number was set to 10. Then after any 10 baskets of no matter what I cook, the fryer's going to ask me to filter. Sometimes that doesn't make sense, especially if we're cooking a lot of fries, and you might want to set that higher. And in that case, you'd want to use something like mixed, meaning every product down here would be assigned a different, let's say a different filter time. Fries, I might be able to cook 18 baskets before I filter. Strips, I may cook 6 baskets because they're a little messier and I need to filter more often. So in a mixed mode, we work off of a percentage. And typically what we're looking for is every time I cook a basket of fries, and if I have that number set to 18, every time I cook a basket of fries, a percentage starts at 0 and increases. And for this one, it might increase 6%. And for my strips, since that's set at 6 baskets, that might increase about 12, 15% every basket I hit. And so what we're doing is accumulating filter wear, and as soon as that number hits 100% typically, then the fryer's going to ask me to filter. Another thing with mixed is I can use a filter lockout mode as well, and then have that set to even a higher filter percentage. So if I get to 100% and the team member decides not to filter, then if I accumulate more filter wear and get to 150%, then the fryer's going to lock it down. And it's not set that way by default, but it would lock down and not let the team member cook any products, and then they would have to filter before they would be allowed to cook. So I'll show you how that works. We're going to leave it on mixed. This is saying suggest filter at 100%. I would suggest you leave it at 100%. And then 8B is my filter lockout. By default, it's not enabled, but I can turn that on. And if it is enabled, then we have SP8C, is when do I want the lockout to happen? And that would be when I hit 150%. I'm going to go back and just show one more example if we do global. So we're going back to the simple filter method, meaning like after every 10 baskets we filter. Then it's asking me, okay, so for a full vat, we're going to filter after X amount of cycles. Right now we're 10, but if I wanted that to filter after every 15 baskets, I can change that. And then 8B says filter lockout. We'll have it enabled. And then it's saying, when do we want it to lock out? After 15 baskets, or do we want to make that higher? Maybe we'll just say 20 in this case. So we'll leave it set up that way, and that gives you a good overview of filter tracking.